A very blessed morning to you, Namibia and beyond, and a very warm welcome to your Thursday morning edition of the Offices, Ministries and Agencies Information Sharing Session. As always, we are coming to you live and direct from the Government Information Center studio here in the nation's capital. Thank you so much, Namibia, for tuning in. Now, for this morning's edition, I am your host, Helene Philippus Hamunyela, and I am delighted to introduce to you, Namibia, my studio guest for this morning, the Honorable Minister Ipumbushimi. He is the Minister of Finance and Public Enterprises. And the Honorable Minister is here to expound more light on the newly amended tax laws. And I implore you, Namibia, to be part of this conversation by following the discussions on our social media platforms, where we are streaming this show live. On Facebook, we are at Ministry of Information and Communications Technology. Alternatively, you can stream us live on our YouTube channel, and our handle there is MICT Namibia. Tax is cross-cutting, and none of us is spared from it. Honorable Minister, good morning once again, and welcome back to the Government Information Center.
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Right. Now, as earlier mentioned, Namibia, the Namibian government has recently amended key tax laws to modernize the tax system to improve compliance, boost revenue, and these changes affect stamp duties, income tax, and value-added tax, affectionately known as VAT. Honorable Minister, before we kickstart the discussion, of course, for somebody who is sitting in front of their TV sets right now and is not quite well acquainted with the term duty stamp, what is duty stamp?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think it's important, yes, for us to try and demystify the word stamp, because word stamp is really, I mean, we all work with stamps. We have all send letters. Right. We buy stamps from the post office. Mm-hmm. So there's no difference between the stamp that we are talking about and the ones that we use on a day-to-day basis. Mm-hmm. So you know that on any contract, for instance, when you buy a house, you have to sign a lot of contracts with the banks. Mm-hmm. The bank will have to have a mortgage on your property if you are going to borrow from the bank. Mm-hmm. So that contracts, there will be stamps that has to be attached to that contract. So in other words, you're just like when you buy stamps to send letters, you are now going to buy stamps to put on that contract. Mm-hmm. And that's really a way of government raising money. It's a form of a tax. Mm. Yeah, it's just a disguised tax.
Clever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this is how government collects money with stamps when you sign contracts. Mm-hmm. And therefore the reason why we had to reduce the stamp duties, or in fact increase the threshold, mm-hmm. is to try and provide relief to the low-income earners, mm-hmm. So that when an income earner buys a house, for instance, and if that house is below a certain category or a certain level, a certain threshold, mm-hmm. That means you are not going to practically pay that tax. You are not going to be required to buy stamps, so that that contract that you are going to sign will attract stamps. In other words, So there's no need for you to buy those stamps to put on the contract, and therefore there's no need for you to spend money on stamps and pay that specific tax. And the threshold has now been increased from 600,000. Mm-hmm. So in other words, if you buy a property, for instance, and previously a property below 600,000 mm-hmm. did not attract any stamp duty. Mm-hmm. So you didn't have to buy those stamps. Okay. Now we have increased the threshold. Mm-hmm. So it means if the property that you buy is below 1.1 million mm-hmm. Namibia dollar, so that tax will not be paid anymore. Mm. Yeah. So no stamps will be required on those contracts. Okay. Yeah.
That's a relief, I'm sure, to low-income earners, to be specific, because if you are interested or you are a prospective client that would want to acquire a property and you are earning between, let's say, 100,000 and 1 million point one.
Correct.
Right. Mm-hmm. Then that means you will not be required to put duty stamps on your contract.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Just making sure that I have it correct there. Now, Honorable Minister, of course, there is also very important the aspect of income tax.
Correct.
What are the major amendments that have been effected on to the income tax brackets, and how will these changes impact the individual taxpayers?
Very good. So, like when you started, you were saying it's a package of amendments that have been effected. We have already talked about the stamp duties, and this the aim of making these amendments is really to try and provide relief to taxpayers. That's the theme.
Right.
Yeah. When you want to buy a property, for instance, yeah, so we want to help the low-income earners. But generally, we also want to help other low-income earners, even if you are not going to buy a property. For instance, in terms of the income tax amendment that has been effected, is really to try and provide relief to the low-income earners by lifting the threshold. Currently, the threshold for paying tax, in other words, if you earn an income below 50,000, that was the previous threshold. Below 50,000, you are not going to pay tax, or in other words, you are not liable for tax. We have now increased that threshold because we believe that first of all, inflation has put a pressure on the income, on the real income of households, and therefore the purchasing power of household has been under pressure. So in recognition of that, we have increased the threshold to 100,000. So in other words, if your income is 100,000 Namibia dollar per year, you are no longer going to be liable for tax. Now, of course, that is not only a relief to those that are below that threshold. It means every taxpayer's income, the first 100,000 is exempted, and that's why all of you actually benefited from the tax reliefs. And this is no longer an academic conversation, because I think you have all felt that in your bank accounts and stuff like that. So that's really the idea. So yes, it's impacting people in two ways. First of all, low-income earners that were earning above 50,000, between 50,000 and 100,000, those ones will not be paying tax at all. And then therefore the tax that they have paid before, that needs to be refunded, and going forward they won't pay tax at all. Okay. Every Namibian who pays tax, the first 100,000 Namibia dollar will be exempted. That's why you are also getting you are also getting a relief, and going forward you're also going to get a relief because your first 100,000 Namibian dollar is exempted. Right. So that's one of the changes that have taken place in the amendment of the Income Tax Act. But there are various other amendments that people are not familiar with, but we can also break them down today if you want us to provide more details. Yes, please. Yes. For instance, so yes, that's the threshold has changed, but one of the changes that have also changed is we have also made an allowance to incentivize employers to take in interns. Yeah, because we are worried about people leaving universities, people leaving vocational centers, but they are not able to get internship. Right. Yeah. So one of the things that we have introduced is a tax incentive that says if you are an employer and you are going to take in an intern, of course you are going to pay an allowance. Yeah, but we are going to deduct 50% of that allowance from your tax liability. So we are practically reducing your tax by 50%. And the idea behind that is really to try and encourage employers to take more and more interns so that we can equip our people who are leaving tertiary institutions with practical skills, and so that they can become more employable, and they can find jobs. Right. That's really the idea behind it. So that's one of the amendments that have been made in the new Income Tax Act. But I'm not hearing Namibians talking about it. I'm only hearing Namibians talking about tax refunds. Right. So I think that's also something that we need to be aware of. Absolutely. Yeah. Because it's quite important. Yeah. Namibia, I am joined in the studio, as earlier mentioned, by the Honourable Minister of Finance and Public Enterprises. That's Honourable Ipumbu Shimi. He's here with me in studio. If there is anything, like I earlier said, that we are not spared of, is tax.
So it's cross-cutting. Be tuned, be part of this conversation. Follow our discussion on the our social media platforms where we are currently streaming this show live. Do post your questions in the comment sections. On Facebook, we are at Ministry of Information and Communications Technology. Alternatively, you can also stream us live on our YouTube channel, and our handle there is MICT Namibia. Be part of this discussion. I'm sure you will have a lot to learn from this very important discussion for this morning. Now, Honorable Minister, given the aforementioned amendments, are there any new deductions, tax credits, or allowance available to individuals, businesses under the amended income tax? I know you mentioned the incentives to employers with regards to in-service training, or is it?
Internship.
Internship, yes. What other benefits or deductions, credits is there for individuals or businesses?
Yeah, so we have already talked about the relief given to individuals, individual taxpayers. We have talked about the relief given to employers who are going to, take in more interns. The third thing that we need to talk about is the relief given to companies and close corporations. As you know, the companies and corporations pay what is called a companies tax or a corporate tax. Yeah, so that tax has been in the region of 32% of their income. So if you have taxable income, so you make an income, you deduct your expenses, some expenses are allowed by tax. So once you make a profit, now part of 32% of that profit goes to government as a company or a closed corporation. But we have also realized that we need to reduce that. First of all, when we compare with our region, we have realized that the income tax of companies in our region is, or in Namibia, is relatively higher compared to our neighbors, for instance, Botswana, South Africa. Botswana, I think, is at 25%. South Africa, I think, is 28%. So we have also then decided that we also need to start reducing ours because we need to attract investments.
Right.
Yeah, and if we need to attract and encourage investments, domestic investment and also foreign investment, it also means that our tax rate has to be more competitive. So that has now been reduced to 31%, and for this year. Next year, we have also made a decision that we are going to reduce it to 30%, and the direction of travel is really for us to reduce it further. Of course, it doesn't mean that we are going to make it zero. Companies still have to make a contribution to the running of the state, but what we want to achieve is to have a competitive tax rate that is going to, excuse me, that is going to help us to attract more domestic investments and also more foreign investments. So that's one of the changes that have been made. And again, is to incentivize companies and close corporations to invest more, because we want to see more investments, because more investments mean more jobs and more income.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now, Honorable Minister, I'm sorry to be taking you back a little. As you were talking, something or I thought of a question. Does the tax refund perhaps only include tax on annual, is it just pay as you earn, or is it also on your annual bonuses, housing subsidy, or will this be paid separately?
Yeah. So, well, when the tax office is looking at your income, it's looking at the whole package.
Yes.
The whole package. Yeah. So what income are you getting per year? And so the relief in terms of the threshold basically just says whatever income you are getting as an individual. So the first 100,000 is going to be exempted. So it doesn't discriminate because it adds everything up.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the relief is based on your total income.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot from this conversation because it also affects me as a taxpayer and as a civil servant. So please bear with me. I will be posting some of these questions as
anytime. So please feel free.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Honourable Minister, we of course cannot be discussing the new tax amendments without talking about the transfer duties. For starters, in layman's term, what are transfer duties and who is liable to pay transfer duties?
Very good. So transfer duties, just like we have talked about stamp duties,
Yes.
it's more or less in the same line of thinking. Again, here we're trying to provide relief to households, individuals who are buying properties. Yeah. So when you buy a property, there's a certain tax that has to be paid. Yeah, it's called a transfer duty because now that property is going to be transferred into your name.
Right.
So when that property is transferred into your name, you pay a tax to government. So as I said before, government has got different ways of collecting money.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is just another way of collecting money.
Yes.
Yeah. So before the amendment, the threshold for paying that tax was 600,000 Namibia dollar. In other words, again, just like there with the stamp duty, if a property that you are buying is below 600 Namibia dollar, that property that you are buying will not attract any transfer duty. We have now noticed that prices have increased, property prices have increased, and this threshold has not been adjusted for quite a long time. So we have now decided to also increase the threshold to 1.1 million. Okay. So again, to try and provide relief to the low-income earners who want to buy properties. And the idea is really to encourage people to buy properties, and specifically the low-income earners who are struggling to buy properties. So we are taking that tax away for anybody who's buying a property that is below 1.1 million Namibian dollars. So you are no longer going to pay that transfer duties. A property above that, yes, will attract transfer duties. And you have different levels. So if your property is at 2 million, this is the kind of rate you're going to pay. If a property is above, this is a property, that's the tax or the transfer duty that you're going to pay. But below 1.1, no duty. It's liable, and therefore you're not going to pay any duty on the property that you're going to buy. So that's the thinking. And again, just to come back with what I started before, the idea is really to provide first relief to taxpayers, and secondly to encourage taxpayers to buy properties and have a home.
Right.
Yeah.
Indeed, it is a relief given that there is no stamp duties, no transfer duties for properties within the range of 1.1 million. So indeed, Namibia, help is here. You've prayed so much and your plea has been heard. The Honourable Minister, the government of the Republic of Namibia, through the Minister, of course, and the Ministry of Finance and Public Enterprises have, had your pleas and they've come to your aid. Now, Honourable Minister, of course, as I've earlier mentioned, value-added tax, as we also cannot speak about this newly adjusted tax laws without mentioning the value-added tax, which is affectionately known as VAT. What are the changes that have been introduced into the VAT rates or VAT-exempt items under the new amendments?
Well, I think on VAT, so the tax rate has not changed at all. So the amendments have been targeting SMEs, yeah, and the idea behind that is to say, because the current registration threshold is 500,000 Namibian dollars. So in other words, if you earn an income as a company, yeah, because VAT applies to companies and close corporations, if you earn an income, and that income or your turnover per year, it's above 500,000, you have to register for VAT.
Right.
Yeah. So in other words, when you pay for VAT, when you are registered, you are able to claim, or you are able to claim. So it means when you pay VAT when you are buying your products, because these are entities that sell, that do trade. Yeah, you buy, you sell. Or you buy, you manufacture, you sell. Yeah. So the idea behind it is that, yes, when you do that, if you are above 500,000, you should be able to submit your records for the taxman to see, or tax office to see how much input tax, in other words, how much tax did you pay when you were buying your input or your materials, and how much did the customer pay when you sold the goods. So the registration threshold has been 500,000. We realize that that is a burden, especially for the smaller entities, the SMEs, because to register for VAT, it is very burdensome, because there are a lot of documents that are required. You have to employ an accountant to make sure that your tax is reconciled and things like that. So we are now saying that we need to reduce the burden on the SMEs, so and therefore lift the registration requirement to 1 million. So you are only required to register for VAT if your income, which is calculated in terms of what is called a turnover. Turnover is basically your income per year.
Right.
Yeah, income without deducting any expenses. If it's above 1 million, you have to register for tax, for VAT. If it's below 1 million, you don't have to.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So and the idea is really, allow businesses, smaller businesses, to spend more time on their businesses, for them to grow, not to overburden them with, paperwork and submission that has to be given to NAMRA, to the Inquirer. Let them run their businesses and create more job opportunities for Namibians. That's the thinking behind it.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Honorable Minister, I'm thinking more on in line of, see, when I go to the shop and I buy bread or milk or whatever, I see there is always, on my receipt, there is always a little section down there on the receipt that says VAT.
Correct.
Does that also imply now to, an individual Namibian, if I go to the shop, is that VAT also reduced, or does it remain as it currently is? Or is it up to who is in charge of making such changes?
Okay, very good. Very good. So at the moment, we have not reduced the rate.
Okay.
The rate remains the same that you pay. But we have only increased the registration threshold.
Right.
In other words, the requirement for the trader to register. Now, if you go to a shop, that shop is probably, if that shop makes an income of more than 500,000 at the moment, prior to the amendments of the VAT Act. So if their income was above 500,000, they will be registered for VAT. So what will then happen? First of all, when you buy bread, I should state that bread is actually tax exempted. So you don't pay VAT on bread and some of the basic food stuff.
Okay.
But other things, yes, you will pay VAT. For instance, if you go to a shop and buy a week or something like that.
Nice one.
Yeah, that is not exempted.
Okay.
So you'll have to pay VAT. Okay. Now, the trader who is selling you VAT, if the turnover is above 500,000, now it's going to be 1 million. So that person will charge you VAT. Yeah? Yeah. So, and that person will have to pay that VAT to government. Of course, because they are registered, we will have to pay to deduct the VAT that they have paid when they're buying those products, or when they were manufacturing, or when they were buying the materials to manufacture those products.
Right.
Yeah. So they only pay the net, and that's why VAT is actually a better tax to administer, because there are records. Because if you have bought something, there is a record of buying. If you have sold something, there's a record of selling. So the tax office is able to consult those documents. Okay. That's why VAT is better than other forms of tax. Like, for instance, before we introduced VAT, we used to have something similar called general sales tax, but it didn't work like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, I am learning a lot from this conversation, and I hope you are too, Namibia. And I'm imploring you to be part of this discussion by following the conversation on our social media platforms, where we are currently streaming the show live. On Facebook, we are at Ministry of Information and Communications Technology. Alternatively, you can stream us live on our YouTube channel, and our handle is MICT Namibia. Be part of this conversation, and do post your questions on the comment sections, and you will be able to get your responses or your feedback from the Minister here with me in studio. Now, Honorable Minister, we are live on our social media platforms, and we are getting quite a number of questions from there. Mr. Simon Vita wants to know concerning the tax refund. What do we do to get our tax refund, especially those who retired from the public service government this year? What do you have to say about that, Honorable?
Very good question. Who will be, because maybe I need to explain. Let's start from ground zero again.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you get a tax refund, ordinarily you only get a tax refund when you file your tax return at the end of the financial year. Yeah. So people were actually not supposed to get their refunds now, but we have then decided that because again the relief has to come earlier. Let's find a way of going around the law for people to get their refunds early. That's why we said employers, instead of paying us the tax that is due to us, because they have already over-deducted, they must first pay off that over-deduction to the employees, so they don't have to pay us now. Okay. Make sure that they pay their employees. Now, for a pensioner, who is their employer? A pensioner who used to work for government, their employer will be GIPF.
Okay.
Yeah, so GIPF will have to give them the tax refund. So I have not talked to GIPF, but I have seen an announcement in the law, in the media, saying that GIPF is going to pay tax refunds, I believe, on the 28th of November this year.
Yes.
Yeah, so because that's their so different employers will choose when they're going to pay the tax refunds. Otherwise, if they are not able to do that, but I can't imagine an employer who is unable to do that, because all we are saying is that we are not saying that you must get more money to pay the tax. We are just saying the money that you are supposed to pay to NAMRA or to the Minister of Finance, don't pay it to us, pay to your employees until you have paid off all the over-deduction that have taken place since March the 1st this year. Right. So yes, for a former civil servant, GIPF is their employer, and GIPF has announced that they are going to do that in November.
Right.
Yeah.
So Vita, I hope you got your response from the Minister. So if you have retired this year, your employer, since you have ceased working for the government of the Republic of Namibia, if you were a civil servant, your employer is now GIPF, and they should be taking care of you. And you should look out on their websites perhaps, or maybe just contact them to ensure what arrangements are in place to ensure that your tax refund is paid. But as the Honourable Minister mentioned, and I've also seen it circulating in the media, they did mention something about end of November. Now, Honourable Minister, back to the questions. How have the new amendments impacted the VAT compliance in reporting to requirements for businesses, particularly SMEs?
SMEs, yes. So the idea is really to provide relief to SMEs by reducing the registration requirement, or by reducing the registration requirement, because, as I said before, for SMEs, if your income is below 1 million, you don't have to register, and therefore you don't have to, bother yourself with completing forms, submitting those forms to NAMRA. Manage your business, focus on managing your business, focus on increasing your business opportunities, and focus on creating jobs for Namibians. That's really the relief and the message that we are giving to the SMEs. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Having said that, Honourable Minister, now Are there any new industries or services now that is subject to VAT, or have any sectors been granted relief from VAT, pardon me, under the new laws? I think you mentioned earlier that due to the threshold that is now increased from 500 to now 1 million, so those ones are now given, that I believe that's a relief. But it is a question that was posted, so I just needed to post it or relay it through to the Honourable Minister.
Correct. You have already answered the question, I think.
Right. Yes.
I don't have to answer that question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed. I hope those of you, our viewers and listeners, that have posted questions on our social media platforms, you've gotten your responses from the Honourable Minister. And now, Honourable Minister, the next segment is intentionally set aside for the media practitioners or journalists that are here present with us this morning. If you have any questions for the Honourable Minister, kindly step closer to the podium. Do introduce yourself and the media house you represent this morning, and briefly put your questions to the Honourable Minister. You have the podium.
Good morning, Honorable. My name is Linnea Dishena. I'm a journalist with NAMPA. My question is relating to, you say that employers have no excuse not to pay the tax refunds. So I want to find out, because it's still an issue in the community or in the public. So those employers that are not paying this tax refund or are yet to pay, or maybe they are saying that there are challenges, how can these employers be held accountable from the perspective of employees?
Okay, very good. I believe there must be a goodwill from the side of all the employers, because it's not a legal requirement for them to pay. As I said, ordinarily by law, as a taxpayers, when the tax rate changes, you get your refund. If you were over deducted, if you were over deducted, you'll wait until the end of the financial year, and the end of the tax year. And the end of the tax year is end of February every year. So the end of this tax year will be end of February 2025. So once that happens, then you file your tax return. NAMRA will then calculate the tax that they have deducted, and NAMRA will then determine whether there was an over deduction, and they will refund you. That's how things work normally. Now, this new arrangement where we are saying that employers must refund, we basically just a faster way of helping people to get their tax return earlier. Otherwise, or tax refunds earlier, not returns, but refunds. Otherwise, they will have to wait until next year. So I will be very surprised if there will be an employer who says, I want to pay NAMRA, I don't want to pay you, because that's essentially what we're saying. I have heard before when we announced this, employer thought that they would have to borrow additional money to pay the tax refunds. It doesn't have to be like that. In fact, it shouldn't be like that. All we are saying is that, so you have deducted, and that money was paid over to NAMRA. Now, while you still have a tax credit, instead of waiting for NAMRA to refund you next year, so the employer doesn't have to pay that money to NAMRA anymore until you still have a tax credit. So in other words, let me give an example. If the over deduction, because the refunds started as from the first day of March 2024. So because the law was made effective basically starting that date. So in other words, the tax that was over deducted since that time needs to be paid back. But because that tax was already paid to NAMRA. So all we are saying is that now, because you already have that tax credit, in other words, that that money that belongs to you that is now with NAMRA. So employer, you pay us on a monthly basis, because every employee, pays tax on a monthly basis. Don't pay that tax to NAMRA. Pay it to the employee. So you're not losing anything
at all.
So we're either going to pay that tax to NAMRA, or you are paying it to the employee. So what are you going to lose? So I will actually be very, very surprised if there's an employer who says, I can't do that, because you are not losing anything. So do you choose to pay NAMRA, and NAMRA is telling you that you don't have to pay us, or do you choose to pay your employees? And I think it's right to pay your employees. Will there be any legal action that can be taken. Of course, there is not, because this is not it's not something that is in the law. It's basically an administrative measure that we believe will help employees and the employers to refund their employees with their tax over deduction earlier than it would have taken in a normal way. So I really want to implore on all those employers. I believe it's probably, if they're not going to do that, it's probably a misunderstanding, because we have realized when we announced this, there was a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation.
Right.
And we have tried to clarify. And really the simplest answer is that you have nothing to lose. You actually have something to gain by paying back the money that was over deducted to your employees earlier than for them to wait for NAMRA, or for you, then you paying that money to NAMRA. NAMRA doesn't need that money now. Your employee needs the money now. So if there's an employer who is not able to do that, I would want to know why.
Okay.
And I would like to have a conversation with that employer.
Right. Okay. Do we have any more questions from the media practitioners in the House this morning? No more questions. Okay, in absence of the questions from the media, Honourable, before we conclude this conversation, I'd like to know, for compliance sake, for a taxpayer who hasn't filed for this, okay, but you earlier on mentioned that it's from the tax year ends end of February, so it's from March to where we are right now. So I'm just wondering, for compliance sake, do those who haven't filed, let's say last year or so, are they still entitled to this tax refund? And how would the agency, which is now NAMRA, ensure that they are paid if they haven't, filed for their taxes?
Yeah. But very, very good question. So, so there's a difference between filing and the tax being paid over to NAMRA. So there are, for instance, employers deduct tax every month from you and pay it over to NAMRA. Of course, there are exceptional circumstances where some employer illegally do not pay over the tax they have deducted.
Right.
Yeah. So that's an illegal thing, because you are practically taking somebody's money and you're not paying it over to the receiver, because we were supposed to pay it over to the receiver. That's illegal. So that means that person is not going to benefit because the tax was never paid to NAMRA.
Right.
Yeah. So the tax relief is only for those who have paid, whose tax was paid over to NAMRA. Because the money is now sitting with NAMRA. NAMRA was supposed to refund them only next year, so they need to get their refund from their employer.
Okay.
So, but if the employer has not paid has not paid that, that's an illegal thing, and NAMRA will have to have a conversation with that employer. So that's one. The second thing is that, yes, you may not have submitted your tax return, and these days it's actually online, because you actually do it on ITAS.
Yes.
But if the tax was paid, you can still get your refund. But that's not an excuse for you not to submit your return.
Right.
We still want you to submit your return, because that's how you reconcile the tax that has been paid. Because sometimes employers over-deduct, and you won't realize it. Only NAMRA, when you submit your return and with all the documents, NAMRA then is able to determine whether the tax that has been paid to you has been excessive, and therefore they need to refund you, or sometimes in some exceptional circumstances you owe.
Yes.
Now, if you owe, you don't want that amount to accumulate for a long time, because by the time we wake up, you may owe 50,000, and that's a serious bill that you have to pay.
Right.
So it's always important for people to file their tax returns every year. As I said, this time around, since the introduction of ITAS, it has become very easy. You submit online, and then the system actually even automatically calculates. Of course, they still have to audit in some instances, but you are able to get quicker feedback. So please, all of us as Namibians, we must submit our tax returns. That's how we can keep our tax books cleaner. Because if we don't keep our tax book cleaners, the tax office, they may not catch up with you now, but when they catch up with you, you'll be in trouble.
And they surely will.
Yeah.
Right, Honorable Minister, we have almost come to the end of our discussion today. But before I let you go, I'd like to have your final remarks, especially pertaining to the newly amended tax laws. What do you have to say to the Namibian nation?
To the Namibian nations, once again, we will want to thank the Namibian nation, especially the people who are tax compliant. We are only able to do that because we have additional income that we can distribute back to the nation. And therefore, we want to encourage people to continue to pay their taxes. It's the right thing to do because we will not be able to do these things, even to have this conversation if the state doesn't have resources,
Right.
you know, to provide public goods such as news, such as roads, such as hospitals, unless we pay our taxes. So we really want to encourage our taxpayers and Namibians in general to be good citizens and pay their taxes. Secondly, we also want to thank Team NAMRA because we are only able to provide the relief if NAMRA is able to collect tax. Because if the state doesn't have money, we will not be able to give you tax relief.
Right.
Yeah, we are only able to give this tax relief because the state is now collecting more money and we are saying, well, let's give the nation some relief. So Team NAMRA, I think instead of criticizing them, we must applaud them.
Right.
Because they are really doing a good job and we must support them. So it doesn't mean that they will not make mistakes. They may make mistakes here and there, but I think as a team, they are really doing a good job. And I think they are moving in the right direction. Of course, I also want to thank my team, my colleagues at the Ministry of Finance. For the last few weeks or so, they have been sleeping in the office to process your tax returns and tax refunds. You probably don't know about that. We promise you that the tax refunds will be in your account on the 7th. It came on Saturday.
It came earlier.
Yeah, on the 6th.
Yes.
So. But behind that, there was a lot of work. And I would want to thank my colleagues for the hard work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Honorable Minister, I would also personally want to thank you, and on behalf of many other Namibians who have received their, relief the past Saturday, I'd like to thank you and your team so much for this relief. It meant a lot in our pockets. Indeed, it came on time, and we honestly appreciate your proactiveness, and of course, we wish you well and all the best. Of course, there are many other things to come, but we appreciate what you are currently doing with your team of well-versed, experts. We highly appreciate. And I would also really like to thank you, Honorable Minister, for taking out time from your busy schedule to come and grace us this morning and educate the Namibian nation with regards to the newly amended tax laws. We really have learned a lot from this conversation. I, for one, did. And I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of many Namibians who were listening and watching TV this morning, or maybe watching on their social media platforms. We appreciate your efforts and your concerted efforts in making sure that the Namibian nation is really well taken care of, and you have our, concerns at heart. We really appreciate, and thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for being here this morning.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure.
All right.
Thank you.
Right, Namibia, that is all the time we had for today's discussion. Do join us again next time when we unpack another fruitful discussion here at the Government Information Center. From myself, Hileni Fela-Pasamunyela, and the entire GIC production crew, thank you so much for tuning in. Take care, Namibia.